is where you willfully mislead somebody, knowing that what you're saying is factually incorrect.
I think I lie very well for my profession.
What does a liar look like? What does a psychopath look like?
I just want to say I hope there's a lot of criminals listening to this. You'll be picking up some good tips.
Hi, Bradford. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you, Steve. Yourself?
I'm rejuvenated. Just got back from China, where I went away on a golfing trip with some very good friends of mine, around about 10, 11 days, I think it was. A lot of golf, a lot of alcohol, and the golf suffered as a result of the alcohol. So it's a bit of a chain reaction.
Right. So I thought it was a little bit of a speaking tour as well.
Yeah, I did do a very quick gig over there. So
just at the airport, was it? Yeah, hey, you two, stop lying. Anyway, where's the golf course?
No, if the ATO are listening, it was a legitimate gig.
Right, okay. God, I hope they're not listening. If they are listening, get back to work.
That's right. I've got documents, I've got receipts, I've got everything I need.
Right. And so you're rejuvenated. That's good.
I am. I've had some pretty busy days. I guess when people are lying, I'll always be in business. And when people are killing each other, I'll also be in business because people want to know when they're being lied to. So at the moment, it's busy.
Could I just ask, how many times do you think people attempted to deceive you from the moment you left your house or your apartment to go to the airport, to get on a plane, to go to China?
Yeah, hard to quantify, but walking through the duty-free section of the airport, I was talking to a lady there, and she was saying, these are the best prices, and you're not going to get them any cheaper than duty-free. Well, in fact, I did jump on Google and saw that Dan Murphy's were offering similar alcohol, similar prices. So, and we are going to lead into the retail world and deception in the retail world a little bit later. But everywhere we go, at some stage, we're going to look at a billboard, or we're going to watch a commercial, or we're going to listen to a commercial. And commercials are designed to influence and change behaviour. And in the retail industry, it's to buy, and as we know, emotions drive behaviour. And if you can tap into that emotional area, then you can drive behaviour. And it's also about perception, which we see in advertising as well. It's about value. People think that, and I've seen it quite often. Sometimes people think they're getting a great deal or great value when really they're not. Is that deceptive?
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I don't understand at the airport is, pardon me, it's a bit early for my throat to be going, is how much things cost there. And as I said once to somebody at the airport, if only there was some nearby transport hub that would allow for the cheap delivery of things. Oh, wait a minute, it's an airport. Because if you look at that difference between the price, say, and duty-free, let's say, for argument's sake, a bottle of scotch was $10. Right?
That's a pretty bad bottle of scotch, by the way.
Okay, but then it would be, say, $15 at a normal bottle shop. And at the airport, it'd be $25.
It's price gouging. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely gouging.
It's like you go. I remember the olden days. You go to a movie, and like a choc top, $12. How do they justify that? I can buy a box of 4 Magnums for less than that.
I know. And well, I used to do a joke about how people said you just came back from overseas. Did you buy anything duty free? And I said, no, I blew all my money on the way out. Bought a pie at the airport.
It's so true.
Went broke.
I did a domestic flight the other day, and I bought a coffee. And I love my coffee.
Yeah.
And what do you think it cost? It was a medium-sized coffee. Have a guess.
Medium size. I know I'm going to go under because I'm going to try and be a normal person. It was $6.50.
It was $8.90.
$8.
How do they justify that?
I know.
That reminds me, I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I was filming one of the episodes for The Hunters, a bit of a plug there, Channel 7, 7 Plus, I one of the days I injured my back and we couldn't film until I could walk, literally. And anyway, so the crew were setting up and I said to these guys, I said, look, who wants to have a coffee? I'll go get it. They go, oh, no, we can do that. I said, no, I'll go get it. So I get the orders. I walk into the shopping centre at Bondi Junction and I walk up and I order the coffee and this pimply, 16-year-old says to me, he goes, oh, do you have a seniors card? I looked him straight in the eye. I said, are you old enough to make coffee? I thought, screw you, seniors card. Oh, I look that old? Yeah. What do you think? It's great. But I think what we need to talk about today is something
just before you say that, I bought a coffee in the city on Sunday.
Yes.
Right. And the young woman behind the counter was dressed in a leather apron. Right. She had on a jaunty cap. And she said, and she took my order and she said, all right, that will be a few minutes. And there was no espresso machine. Right.
Uh-oh.
It was basically it was the 7-Eleven machine behind the counter, but they dressed her up as a barista. And then she basically pushed the buttons and stood there.
Were they going?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure she was making the sound into the tin. But I'm just standing there. I was slightly hungover. And I was just standing there, I was laughing silently because, again, it was just like, and that's all they sold too was coffee. You could get a cup of tea, maybe a hot chocolate or whatever, but not even a bun or anything like that. And it was portrayed as a coffee shop, and it's a corner of the 7-Eleven.
Well, I actually bought a coffee machine on Sunday and I went to this place and the guy obviously knew all about his coffee and stuff like that. And I was in a bit of a situation where I didn't know whether I should buy a German coffee machine or an Italian coffee machine. So they described it to me this way. German engineering, spot on. Right? No problems with boilers, double boilers, or all the dispensers, all that sort of stuff. The Italian, that's got style, but doesn't have the same engineering. So here I am. I'm looking at this fantastic Italian coffee machine, like all this, chrome, reminded me of my old Harley, and then I look at this terribly ugly coffee machine. Like seriously, it was the ugliest looking thing you've ever seen in your life. But I go, this one, the German one, the ugly one, makes fantastic coffee. And I go, do we have a hybrid or something?
Yeah.
And anyway, I got, and I find out later on that the German machine that I purchased is actually built in Italy. So I've been in coffee nirvana the last couple of days, making coffee. So that's probably why I'm so wired at the moment.
I was going to say, you look like you haven't slept for 3 days.
That's
just
true.
Sampling your own wares. How was it marketed to you? Where did you go to get that? And what were the choices you made?
Well, I had for all the coffee lovers out there, I had a Breville Duo Boil, right? Yes. And it's a bit of a standing joke with me and all my friends. I've had that coffee machine for the last 23 years. That coffee machine has outlasted the majority of my relationships.
Wow.
So when that coffee machine died, it was almost like I was going to have a funeral for it.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was tight, like the seals were leaking and, it just wasn't boiling properly and whatnot. So
that's so sad.
Which part, the relationship or my coffee machine lasting longer?
I can imagine you just hang on. Just hang in there and just one day just go.
It just gave up the ghost.
It's gone to the farm.
It's gone to the farm and
over the Rainbow Coffee Bridge.
So anyway, there was no point of no return, and I did a bit of research, as we all do now with AI and Google and blah blah blah, AI insights, and I started going down this rabbit warren.
Yeah.
And, there was so many, it's like I've got newfound respect for baristas. some people call them barristers, but obviously there's a clear difference.
You've never like them.
And, like I'm always searching for that perfect coffee. And the funny story there is I do coffee art. Well, I try. It just looks like
I've seen your coffee art.
Yeah,
it's not
it's
bad.
pretty. Oh, no, it's not good. It's bad. I can tell you're lying. Anyway, you're just being polite.
Your hearts do look like livers, but yeah.
Well, actually, the funny thing is, I put some of these on social media, and now what is it? Is it the Rockshard test or something? They show.
Rockshard.
That's it. Thank you. Show all these images. What do you see? And I'm just blown away. I might do a palm leaf, and people see a person riding a horse along the beach or something. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to answer your question,
Sorry, can I just tell you a very funny story?
I'll be the judge of that, and so will the audience. All right, go for it.
About the Rorschach test. It's a very old joke. I think it might be a Woody Allen joke.
Well, maybe we should explain to the viewers and the listeners, I should say, what it is.
Okay, it's the ink blot test. Rorschach test is the ink blot test.
Yep.
And it used to be a psychological or a psychiatric evaluation test where they show you pictures of ink blots, and it's designed for you to interpret what you see. And God, I imagine there's a whole generation of people who wouldn't even know what an ink blot is, but just a whole lot of ink smudged on a page, and it's an amorphous shape. It doesn't look like anything, and it's open.
Quite abstract.
Yeah, it's open for you to interpret. And there's psychiatrists. This guy goes to see this guy, the psychiatrist, because he has a sex obsession. And the psychiatrist says, "Well, that's interesting. Have a look at these." And he shows him the first ink blot test. And he goes, "What do you see?" And the guy says, "Well, I see a man and a woman making love in a bed." He goes, "Interesting." He goes, "What about this one?" He goes, "Well, I see 2 men and 3 women making love in a camping site." And he goes, "Well, that's very interesting." He goes, "Well," it shows him another one. He goes, "What do you see here?" And he says, "Well, I can see there that there's a man and a woman making love down by the beach." And he goes, "Oh my God, you really are obsessed with sex." And he goes, "Me? You're the one showing me all the dirty pictures."
Oh, boy.
And it's sorry, nothing to do with deceit, but it's a very, very good joke.
I've often wondered, what's the rationale behind that? What are they looking for?
Well,
If there's any psychiatrists who are listening, by all means, let us know, because I'd be interested to see how do they quantify? What are they looking for? Isn't everyone's interpretation or perception different?
Have you seen this? Their interview techniques are awesome because they've really utilised the quite well. And I'd say, I haven't really seen a psychiatrist, but I've seen a couple of psychologists, and they'll say something, and I'll give them an answer, and I'll say, "What do you think of that?" And they go, "Well, what do you think of that?" Well,
and you go, "I'm paying you."
Exactly. I'm sorry, I'm not a psychologist. Anyway, so
all right, so let's talk about. The conversation, one of the biggest conversations at the moment in Australia involves pricing tactics by Woolworths, and, of course, Coles and other retail outlets do it as well. Now, for those of our listeners that are not residing here in Australia, let me explain a little bit about what's happening. Australia's consumer watchdog, which is called the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, has been investigating claims that some discounts may not be genuine. And here's how it works. A product is advertised as was $10, now it's $7. Sounds like a great saving, right? Well, what if that product was never really consistently sold at $10 or was briefly increased just before the discount? Now, in behavioural analysis, we call this framing and perception manipulation. That's where a person's perception is manipulated in favour of the vendor or the seller. So it's done in such a way to make it look like you've received a benefit or an advantage. Right. Now, at the moment, the Australian Competition Consumer Commission, which is basically a watchdog that oversees, things like, false, fraudulent, misleading claims that retailers, they might take limited time only, 3 only left, countdown timers, in the next 11 hours or 10 hours, the goods will be sold.
So they don't regulate prices, but they look for dishonesty in pricing. Marketing.
Yeah. Well, especially if it's misleading or it's deliberate misconduct. And, some people would turn around and say, well, that's marketing. I would say that's deceptive behaviour.
Yeah.
And to give you a bit of a parallel here, and
this is federal, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So just to give you a bit of an example, as you know, I used to be a police detective, and under Section 82 of the Crimes Act, there's an offence called obtain financial advantage by deception. Let me break that down for you. If, say, for example, I lie to you or I deceive you into believing that this product is worth more than what it is and you purchase it, believing that deception, and you're out of pocket, well, then technically I've committed an offence under the Crimes Act. A great illustration would be I'm selling a car and I want top dollar for the second-hand car. So what I do is I turn back the odometer, so there's less kilometres. So the deception is that you're buying a car that has less mileage and I am receiving a financial advantage. Now, if I do that, that's a criminal offence.
Yeah.
If I'm convicted, I risk, not that you probably would, but I risk potential jail time.
Yeah.
Yet some of these corporate retail giants engage in similar behaviour, and the question is, where's the accountability, transparency? So the commission can impose fines, and they do, but the problem is they'll just write it off.
Well, and let's look a little bit deeper into writing it off. We'll see, writing it off is a tax break. When you write something off as a loss. But there's another thing going on here, which is when these big corporations get fined, like Qantas, etc. They're really bit in the airline.
And for those listeners, Qantas, what they were doing was they were artificially inflating prices, and in some cases they were selling tickets to seats that were actually, they call them overselling, because they believe that they're not always going to fill the aircraft, so they oversell.
Yeah.
And that's a common practice, believe it or not, in the airline industry. But and insurance companies, and some banks charging for fees for services that were never rendered.
Okay, so what I'm talking about here is that when the fines come through, that cost is actually passed on to the consumer,
as it always is. It always is.
So it's not just writing it off. What it is it's passing it on, so that it becomes a business practice. And I worked in the, as you know, I worked in the Australian Tax Office when I left high school with a mate of yours. And it was very clear at the time that companies would just say, well, whatever cost we have in, sailing close to the wind, we can just pass on. So how is that so? Whereas you or I would, we'd end up in manacles.
It's a good question, and it's always been like that, hasn't it? I mean, if you are an individual and you engage in that type of behaviour, you are penalised and charged and potentially convicted, depending on the evidence. And I guess the average schmo doesn't have the power and the money to fight these things, and the big corporates do. And let's not forget, these practices and behaviours repeat themselves over time. Yeah. So the question is, are they learning? Are these retail corporate entities, are they actually learning, or are they thinking, well, you know what, we're making more money in sales than we are getting hit with fines?
Well, I would take it even one step further and just say that these companies are publicly listed companies, so people have shares in them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So where's the point of responsibility with the shareholders? Because they elect the people who make the decisions, who employ the people who make the decisions. And so is it all right to sit back and just say, well, I'm getting all my dividends, when you're in fact complicit?
Well, are you complicit?
Well,
if you're a shareholder, you're not running the company, you're investing in that company. So if you want to make a stand,
why do you have shareholder meetings?
Well, yeah, good point. But
to elect the people who make the decisions on the board to run the company.
That's true.
And so all I'm saying is that I think too that you can't just put the executives who make the decisions in the frame. that there's complicity all the way down the line. This is
Well, if you wanted to make a stand, then you wouldn't go to that supermarket and purchase the goods, but that's not going to have much of an effect. I mean,
so close to my place and the parking's good.
Well, I mean, it's all about understanding behaviour, and you look at it. Why are banks constantly getting hauled over the coals? Why are retail outlets constantly why are big airlines, Qantas and that?
Yeah.
And they keep, to me, I don't know what you think, but to me they keep doing it and
they get away with
keep getting away with it and keep getting fined. So, I mean, what's the best way to moderate or regulate or control behaviour? And yes, you can have consequences, but the consequences aren't working, are they?
They're not working. And in fact, it's almost like the situation where when you're a kid, do you want to get punished by your dad or your mum? Well, back when I was growing up, it was like you'd probably go with your mum because
she doesn't hit as hard.
She doesn't hit as hard as often, or
and you can outrun mum.
Yeah, or she might crumble when you cry. Whereas your father just makes him more determined. We did grow up in another era, didn't we? But it's what's the deterrent? And there's no deterrent. I don't see that as a deterrent. It's just a business expense to them, and they're getting away with it. Well,
and if we were to take that one step further, I remember working at Broadmeadows Police Station, and you may or may not remember Ford manufacturing company was up the Hume Highway.
I thought you were going to say I remember Broadmeadows Police Station. I was so pissed.
I do seem to remember a picture in the charge room. I think you are in the Hall of Fame. No, I'm joking.
No.
Anyway, so we would get called up to Ford all the time, and like the amount of theft and pilferage was unbelievable. And, it's a production line. Yeah. They can't afford to stop that production line. Yeah. So they actually say, okay, we will wear the cost of pilferage and theft. Yeah. But where's it passed on to? The consumer ultimately. Oh, yeah. Because stopping that production line is going to cost mega dollars. And I remember, taking out search warrants. There was literally crates of products going missing, like pallets of stuff. And, of course, once again, it comes down to the behavioural aspects of it. I mean, I think maybe if directors were held to account maybe criminally, yes, I think you'd find a distinct change in behaviour.
I agree. And, it's passed on. I don't know if you ever experienced this, but Coles, before it was Coles, the supermarket used to be the Coles variety store back in the day. And so they sold, they sold lollies, they sold a little bit of clothing, stationery, et cetera, et cetera. And Coles in Camberwell used to have things on display with a centre aisle for the shop assistant to walk up and down and serve people, and you paid over the counter. Mm. And so there were a number of shop assistants. Mm. Or if you might even remember in Burke Street in the city, there were attendants. Mm. There were attendants everywhere watching over everything, and you paid, and sometimes they put the money in the tubes and the tube disappeared.
Yeah, remember that.
Okay, so one of the reasons why everything is on display now when you go into a supermarket or when you go into Target or Kmart is that it's self-serve. Mm-hmm. Because it means it's laid out.
Temptation.
It's more tempting. Plus, it cuts down on staff, right? Mm. But also because there is shoplifting and pilfering, okay, and they know that. They long before we all started talking about algorithms, there were algorithms, and they would know how much is going to get pinched. Mm. So we're paying for that as well. Mm. And we're paying for them to do business. And I find that annoying.
I tell you what, now that you've brought up the self-serve system, the other day I went into Coles and there was one person who was actually, doing this scanning, like a customer service officer. And anyway, I'm watching, and I don't know about you, but for some reason I was having a problem with this scanning thing, and I was getting frustrated. Ooh. And I'm thinking, I get it's all about cost savings. I get it's all about expediting the process. But is it? Are people checking out quicker than what they used to do in the old days? And I don't think they are. No. And the other thing is you see one or two staff attendants just walking around there. I wonder how many people now are getting through there with stolen goods compared to what it used to be like last time. And you hit the nail on the head. And the example I like to use is conductors on trams here in Victoria.
Yeah. So conductors on trams used to be people who took your money. You bought the ticket on the tram.
Yeah, you'd buy a ticket from them before iPhones and all that, and they would sit there. And I catch trams occasionally, and no one, and I mean no one, do I see ever tapping on or tapping off. And there's a particular – my office is in South Yarra and I live in the Docklands. And when I catch a tram, like it's unbelievable. And I'm not talking about now because of the fuel crisis, but when people tap on when they're meant to, no one – the number of inspectors that are writing out tickets are unbelievable. Now, this is an interesting thing that this is down my alley, the psychology of it. There was a study done years ago and they found that even people with good morals, if they thought they wouldn't be apprehended or caught for stealing something, they'd probably give it a go.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there are a lot of other people who wouldn't even contemplate it or think about it, but I think that's pretty evident on our public transport system at the moment. There's a lot of fare evasion. A lot of people not paying for whatever reason. And I watch them when you watch the inspectors come on and they do a bolt out the back door or quickly tap on.
I love the bolt for the back door. That's why they should only be one door on a tram.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, and I'd be interested what our viewers think. Firstly, insofar as the retail stuff, do you think it's fair that these big conglomerates are allowed to get away with false, misleading, deceptive conduct and not face the same penalties or consequences that the average person does? And B, with the transport system, do you think that if you were going to get away with it, you'd give it a run? If you knew that you wouldn't be caught, would you give it a run?
Okay, so I just want to just go slightly back to at the moment, because of the petrol crisis in Australia, in Victoria, public transport is free until, I think they've extended it till May.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, and it begs the question, when I drove past, I drove through South Melbourne the other day and I drove past a tram stop and there were six Mikey inspectors standing on the tram stop. And what are they doing?
Yeah, good point. For the next month, what are they doing? Because they don't have to.
They should be painting the office or something.
Yeah, exactly. Cleaning the trams, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's the thing. Yeah, but it's and look, in terms of deception, and we have talked about. Sorry, just to hijack it a little bit, we have talked about undercover before, but we're going to look at that soon.
That's deception, the ultimate deception.
It is the ultimate deception, but it's quite often really portrayed very badly by biking inspectors, because when they dress up to look like they're just normal passengers and you go, but you're all wearing the same gear. You all went to Lowe's and bought the same shirt. No, I'm just a passenger, as is my friend. No, you're not. You're an inspector.
I used to be in surveillance, or what we call the dogs, and I remember when I was doing my initial training, part of it was you had to blend in with the crowd. You did not want to stand out from the crowd. So much so that I'd have a pack, I'd have the radio in the pack, I'd have different hats. I wouldn't have these ridiculous false moustaches like people think. And
reversible jacket.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, look, you do not want to draw attention to yourself. And the best surveillance operatives, and I know you know a couple, I know a few, and maybe in one of the upcoming episodes we can talk about.
We get one in.
Yeah.
We won't know where they are, of course, because they'll be.
No, and we won't be able to identify them probably.
Yeah.
because obviously the line of work. But, I remember, there's a very quick example. I was doing some undercover work and I had to buy a pound of heroin back in the day.
Wow, that's a lot of heroin.
And we had what they call show money. And show money, this is the cash days, it's done by crypto, I guess. But every one of those notes were recorded, serial numbers and everything. And I remember we would go into what we call a buy-bust situation, where that money was never to leave your side. So you might have the special operations group come in and do the arrest, but you were never to leave that money. Occasionally it happens, you lose it, but rare. And I remember this particular day I was doing a job and I had a ankle holster on, and one of the guys throws me up against the wall and he goes, "You're a jack," which is slang for a cop. And I said, "If I was, I wouldn't be working with you cunts." So we'll have to blip that, of course. But it's a matter of blending in.
Yeah.
You do not want to draw attention to yourself, and there are different ways of doing that, and we will talk about that. It's funny because I expose deception, I look for deception, but I found early in my career I was engaged in actively being involved in deception, which is what an undercover does.
I had a couple come up to me in Revolver, which is a well-known nightclub in Melbourne, on a Sunday morning, and the place was absolutely packed. And it was a young couple, a guy and a girl, very attractive couple, but their clothes looked absolutely brand new. Like they just, could have had the labels on them. And the girl said to me, "Excuse me, do you know where we could buy some ecstasy tablets?" And I just laughed at them because
I'm thinking I've got an image of you dressed up as a pimp or something.
It's not only that, like I've never heard anybody say ecstasy tablets in my life, and they just
as opposed to Eckies.
Or Greg Fleet used to tell a joke about how these two undercover cops come up to him in Fitzroy Street one Friday night. And go, they grab him and they go, "We're undercover cops." And he goes, "Well, not anymore." So
blown.
All right, so we don't, I'd love to hear what people think. Why are these people getting away with this? Why are they getting away with being able to just fiddle the prices?
Well, I think that they get away with it because they can. And they do. And as we previously spoken, if the penalty or the ramifications are not set in such a way that they really suffer economic loss, and I mean we've seen it, a couple $100,000 to a big conglomerate like that.
Well, and we know that it's not going to be an economic loss because they're going to pass the cost of
not even a reputational loss, really, when you think about it, because people are still going to go shopping there.
And in fact, the ridiculous extension of that would be that if they got charged and they had to go and do time, somehow we'd have to go and do the time for them because we're paying the price now.
Well, I mean, it's got to come from above, doesn't it? It's got to come from the leadership team, and you need a leadership team in there. Well, this is not right. This is not good enough. How about something different? Truth in advertising. How about that?
And how much do you reckon it is? If look, Qantas did it, the banks did it, the supermarkets, these
insurance
are all
companies.
Yeah, these are all the big companies. They're doing it. How much is being
megabucks
funneled?
Mega. And until such time that there is some ramification or penalty or punishment that fits the crime, it's going to keep happening. And we've seen historically that's exactly what's happening. It keeps recurring.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that will.
Next time we're going to Coles, we'll be on the facial identification system and we'll be refused entry.
No, we'll be in our undercover outfits, Steve. Don't worry about that.
We won't tell them we're undercover.
Yeah. I'll just pay cash. They don't need to see my card. Well, thank you. It's good to have you back.
Great to be back.
And until next time, farewell.
See you soon.
I just want to say I hope there's a lot of criminals listening to this. You'll be picking up some good tips